I'm a very firm believer that any response to threat or violence should remain within the law, in particular with regard to any weapons you may hold and consider using. I'm not a law expert in my own or any other country, but broadly speaking, any physical response to aggression in a civilized society should be a last resort and a measured response. That is, the minimum force necessary. But how about in a fictional scenario? A role scenario without rule of law, where you may no longer have the luxury of law consideration. Imagine, if you will. It's the near future. The government declared a state of emergency a week ago. Power has now failed. Your taps are dry and your toilets won't flush. Supermarket shelves are empty and fuel pumps are dry. People have stopped going to work and are looking out for their own. Compared to others, you're relatively well prepared. You have sufficient food, water, emergency heating and lighting to last a spell. You've chosen to bug in at your suburban home with your partner and children, listening to the reassuring emergency government messages, the only channels that are still broadcasting. You haven't seen the police or any other emergency personnel for that matter in days. You occasionally hear sirens and distant shouting, gunfire. You're woken in the night by the sound of loud banging and shouting. Then you hear breaking glass. You rush to the window and gingerly pull back a curtain. A house further along your street is under attack. A group of looters have broken in and are carrying food and other goods back to their vehicles. You hear your neighbour shouting, his wife screaming. You hear gunshots. The looters are whooping and laughing as they go about their crime. You hear more screaming and crying as your neighbour's teenage daughter is brutally dragged from her home, her torn clothes flapping in the breeze. They bundle her into the back of one of the vehicles and she goes quiet. You grab your phone to call the police, but the network is dead, as it has been for days. You can do nothing. Nothing. Nothing but watch and thank God it isn't your home, and wonder when your turn will come. Now this is a horrible, grim scenario. It's a scenario that seems far removed from our affluent, safe lives. Yet it's a scenario that's no stranger to our world. Something similar is happening every day in one country or another. Indeed, far more brutal scenes are being enacted. Not every country has the luxury of a calm, law-abiding society. Others, as recently with Argentina, experience an increase in violence and lawlessness when the country hits hard times. Only a fool would believe that we in the West have a right to affluence, to law, to order, to safety. So what if it does all go to hell? What if the looting and raping horde come knocking? What can you do? All the animal world knows that there is greater safety in numbers. Think back to our scenario. What if our looters had been met by a substantial vehicle checkpoint at the entrance to the street? What if a neighbourhood patrol or lookout had sounded an alarm that was answered with confidence and determination by every able-bodied teenage boy and man? What if the looters had been faced down, with strength, the moment they hit on the street? Most criminals are cowards at heart. Many are poorly organised. They rely upon opportunity and ability to carry out their crimes. A strong defence can remove opportunity or force an aggressor to reconsider their ability to carry out a crime. In an ideal world, your community would have an emergency plan for dealing forcefully with looters. We don't live in that world, and few of us have close relationships with our neighbours. But that needn't stop you from laying the groundwork for such a plan. Consider sounding out neighbours that you do speak to. You needn't frighten them off, and you needn't reveal yourself as a prepper. The subject could be raised humorously in the pub or after a dinner as a how would we solve that one type conversation. This could plant the seed of thought and give you some idea of how your neighbours think about such things. It might even lead to a plan. Alternatively, create your own perimeter defence plan. There's plenty of advice available on the internet. Come an emergency, you can speak to neighbours individually and recruit them. Do accept that whilst you saw the danger and created the plan, somebody else may emerge as a natural leader. Be flexible. The important thing is to emphasize strength through standing boldly together, and the vulnerability of displaying weakness or standing alone. Sell your plan for NWOS. That's NWOS. Neighbourhood Watch on steroids. Had the looters in our scenario met a confident NWOS, they would have been forced to reconsider their options and likely moved on to a softer target.